There's something deeply unsettling about watching a team unravel in real time, especially when everyone inside the stadium knows exactly what's wrong, but no one on the sidelines is willing to fix it. Sunday wasn't just another bad day for the Cleveland Browns. It was a meltdown that exposed everything broken beneath the surface: pride, politics, and a refusal to face the obvious truth. Dillon Gabriel's performance didn't just disappoint, it collapsed. Missed reads, late throws, total paralysis under pressure. Every snap looked heavier than the last, every drive slower, every decision more uncertain. His teammates could feel it, that sinking sense when your season starts slipping away one incomplete pass at a time. Receivers froze mid-route, hands raised in disbelief. The defense came off the field exhausted, realizing they were carrying the entire franchise on their backs while the offense kept sinking deeper. And yet, just a few yards away, stood Shedeur Sanders, helmet strapped, eyes locked in, mind sharp. The quarterback who had spent weeks preparing for his chance, the one everyone quietly believed could flip the script instantly, never stepped onto the field. He stood there, calm but ready, while chaos unfolded all around him. But here's the part that shocked even the most loyal fans. Head coach Kevin Stefanski never blinked, never adjusted, never pulled the plug. Instead, he clung to a decision that everyone, players, coaches, and fans alike, could see was dragging the team down. What started as a simple strategic choice turned into a public act of stubbornness that split the locker room, infuriated the fan base, and left everyone asking one question: what's really going on inside Cleveland's locker room? Because this wasn't just a bad game, this was something deeper, a team watching its leadership crumble under the weight of its own pride. From the opening snap, something felt off. You could see it in Dillon Gabriel's body language, the hesitation, the second-guessing, the small moments that screamed doubt louder than words ever could. Every dropback looked mechanical, like a quarterback thinking instead of reacting. Every read came a heartbeat too late. And in the NFL, a single heartbeat is all it takes to turn confidence into collapse. Missed reads became the theme of the afternoon. Receivers broke open downfield, waving frantically for the ball, only to watch it sail too high or too late. The rhythm that every great offense needs simply never existed. It was like watching a team stuck between plays, paralyzed by indecision. The huddle grew quieter, the sidelines grew colder. Even the fans could feel it, that suffocating mix of disbelief and dread when you realize the problem isn't the defense or the play calling or bad luck. It's the quarterback. And this wasn't a one-time slip-up. It was a pattern, one that had been building for weeks. Players had seen it in practice, the hesitation, the forced throws, the lack of chemistry that no amount of pep talks could fix. Coaches saw it too, but pretended it wasn't there. Maybe they hoped he'd play through it. Maybe they were protecting their own decisions. Either way, everyone knew this collapse didn't come out of nowhere. It was the slow-motion result of blind faith in a plan that never worked. Defensive players could only watch helplessly as drive after drive died the same painful death. They dragged themselves off the field after another huge stop, only to stand on the sideline and see their offense trip over itself again. The frustration was visible. Helmets slammed into benches, eyes rolled, silent stares between veterans who didn't need to say what everyone was thinking. And through it all, the camera kept catching glimpses of Gabriel pacing the sideline, his expression lost somewhere between confusion and panic. Meanwhile, his backup, Shedeur Sanders, stood calm, locked in, studying the tablet, ready to go. Every time the offense failed, more and more players drifted toward him, like gravity pulling them toward the one person who still looked in control. But the call never came. Gabriel stayed in, the offense kept sinking, and the defense kept carrying the load. It wasn't just a bad game. It was a slow unraveling of trust. By the time the second half rolled around, everyone could see it. This wasn't about performance anymore, it was about pride. And that's when the real tension started to build, because while one quarterback was losing control, another was silently preparing to take over, if only someone had the courage to let him. While the chaos unfolded on the field, Shedeur Sanders stood just a few yards away, helmet strapped tight, eyes locked on every play, the image of controlled intensity. He wasn't laughing, pacing, or sulking. He was studying. Every formation, every coverage shift, every blitz package, he saw it all. And what made it haunting was how ready he looked. Calm, composed, almost too ready for someone the coaching staff refused to use. Players noticed it first. Between drives, as the offense stumbled back to the sideline, more and more teammates started drifting toward him. Not to talk, not to joke, just to stand near him, to see what he was seeing. He'd flip through plays on his ablet, replaying each defensive alignment, mumbling adjustments under his breath. He was doing what starting quarterbacks do, even though he wasn't one. There was a quiet respect that built around him. Receivers leaned in as he pointed out routes that could have worked, protections that should have shifted. It wasn't arrogance. It was focus, the kind that comes from someone who's been waiting so long for a chance, he refuses to waste a single second of it.
And yet, the moment never came. Drive after drive, mistake after mistake, and still, the headset stayed silent. The camera would cut to Stefanski on the sideline, arms folded, face unreadable, eyes glued to a plan that clearly wasn't working. Meanwhile, Sanders waited, disciplined, patient, composed, as if he still believed that eventually performance would outweigh politics. But the longer he waited, the more obvious it became. This wasn't about football anymore. It was about a decision made long before kickoff, a decision rooted in draft hierarchy, coaching pride, and the illusion of control. Behind the scenes, whispers started spreading. Why isn't he in yet? What's he got to do to get a chance? These weren't fans talking. These were teammates, veterans, starters, the guys fighting in the trenches every down. They weren't questioning Sanders' readiness. They were questioning the system that refused to reward it. Because when you're on a team that preaches competition but protects certain players no matter the outcome, that message dies fast. You can't preach accountability when the results say otherwise. And that's exactly what was happening in Cleveland. One quarterback drowning under pressure, another standing inches away, fully prepared, completely ignored. The scene was surreal, a living picture of what happens when leadership chooses pride over adaptability. Sanders wasn't just standing on the sideline, he was watching his opportunity, his teammates' faith, and the team's momentum all vanish in slow motion. And as frustration began to ripple through the locker room, that silence, that refusal to make the obvious move became louder than any interception or fumble could ever be. Because at that point, everyone knew this wasn't just a bad call. This was a message. By halftime, the silence in Cleveland's locker room said everything. Helmets were off, but tempers were simmering. You could feel the split forming, not between offense and defense, but between belief and disbelief. Half the room still clung to the idea that Dillon Gabriel could shake it off. The other half had already moved on, silently wondering why Shedeur Sanders was still standing on the sideline. Players don't usually speak out mid-game. They don't question hierarchy, especially not when emotions are raw. But this time was different. According to several reports, frustration boiled over. A defensive captain confronted the offensive coordinator, asking the question everyone else was afraid to voice. Why are we protecting him? Why not give Sanders a shot? The response, sources say, was as cold as it was predictable. Something about development timelines and sticking to the plan. But to the players in that room, it sounded like a death sentence for their season. You could see it in their faces, disbelief turning to anger. They'd been busting themselves on defense, forcing turnovers, keeping the game alive, all while watching the same offensive breakdown repeat itself drive after drive. And here's the thing. No one was blaming Gabriel personally. They respected the guy. They knew he was giving everything he had. But football's a results business, and everyone in that locker room knew the truth. The team was losing not because of effort, but because of ego. That's when the whisper networks began. Veterans talking quietly in corners, players shaking their heads, muttering about favoritism and politics. You could almost feel morale bleeding out of the room. Meanwhile, Sanders sat quietly at his locker, not sulking, not complaining, just listening. When teammates approached, he'd nod, maybe offer a short word of encouragement. No blame, no gossip, just focus. That silence, that professionalism, only made the contrast sharper. It wasn't just about who was playing quarterback anymore, it was about who the team believed in. By the time they walked back onto the field, the chemistry had changed. The offense moved like a unit running on fumes, cautious, disconnected, hollow. The defense still fought, but the spark was fading. The kind of trust that binds great teams together had cracked, and everyone could feel it. From the stands, it just looked like another bad half. But inside that locker room, something far more dangerous was happening. Faith was fading, leadership was being questioned. And when that happens, when a team starts believing the people calling the shots care more about proving they're right than actually winning, the entire foundation begins to crumble. What started as a quarterback controversy was quietly becoming something far bigger. This was no longer just about who took the next snap. This was about who still believed the coaches knew what they were doing. It was the fourth quarter. That point in every game where heart takes over and coaching philosophy either delivers or destroys. Cleveland was trailing, but not by much. The defense had just forced a massive turnover, setting up the offense with a chance to steal back control. The energy on the sideline spiked. You could feel it. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for.
And then came the silence. Every eye turned toward the coaching box. Every player waited for the one call that could change everything. Sanders, you're in! It never came. Instead, Dillon Gabriel jogged back onto the field. The reaction was instant. You could see heads drop, shoulders slump, helmets shake. It wasn't anger this time. It was resignation. The kind that hits when you realize your leadership isn't going to change no matter how bad things get. The next few plays played out like a slow-motion collapse, a missed throw, a false start, another drive that never even found its rhythm. The same mistakes, the same hesitation, the same unraveling, repeated like a bad dream. By the time Gabriel walked back to the sideline, even he looked drained, like he knew what everyone else was thinking but couldn't say it. Some players couldn't hide it anymore. A veteran lineman slammed his helmet onto the bench, muttering words the cameras couldn't air. Receivers sat in silence, staring into space. On the defensive side, guys who had fought their hearts out all game just stood there, arms crossed, disgusted. One player reportedly said what the entire locker room had been feeling for weeks. "We didn't get beaten. We beat ourselves." That single sentence spread like wildfire. It wasn't just about the loss on the scoreboard, it was about everything that led to it. The favoritism, the blind loyalty, the unwillingness to make the hard call. After the game, the locker room was ice cold. Nobody yelled, nobody pointed fingers, but that quiet, that eerie, suffocating quiet was worse than any shouting match could have been. Players peeled off tape without a word. Coaches avoided eye contact. It felt less like a team and more like a group of people trapped in the same sinking ship, each one silently wondering who was still steering. And yet, in one corner, there was Shedeur Sanders again. Helmet off, calm, focused, the same way he'd been all game, like he knew this moment would define everything that came next, not just for him, but for the entire organization. Because when a team reaches that point, when effort no longer matters because trust is gone, the collapse is no longer physical, it's cultural, it's emotional. And that's exactly where Cleveland found itself. This wasn't just about a loss, it was about a coach's pride swallowing a franchise's potential. It was about a locker room finally realizing that talent means nothing when leadership refuses to listen. The breaking point had come and gone, and what followed would shake the Browns far beyond one Sunday afternoon. Long before Sunday's collapse, the cracks were already showing. They didn't appear suddenly, they crept in quietly,
disguised as routine decisions, small moments, and ignored warning signs that eventually turned into full-blown fractures. It started back in training camp. By every account, Shedeur Sanders had been electric, sharp in drills, confident in reads, unshakably focused. Coaches and players alike noticed it. He wasn't just performing well, he was commanding attention, the kind of attention you can't fake. His footwork was clean, his timing precise, and his leadership natural. You could feel it in how teammates responded to him. The tempo of practice lifted when he stepped under center. But despite everything, the decision had already been made. Dillon Gabriel was the project, the guy the organization had handpicked to develop, to mold, to protect. The depth chart wasn't based on performance, it was built on investment. The message from above was subtle but clear. This was Gabriel's team, no matter how practice went. And that's when the unease began. Players started whispering about favorites, about how some guys had to earn every snap while others got chances on name and draft position alone. It wasn't loud or dramatic at first, just quiet frustration. But in a locker room, that kind of energy spreads fast. Every time Sanders outperformed Gabriel in scrimmages and still got sent to the sideline, the tension grew a little thicker. Every time the offense sputtered in camp and coaches brushed it off, another ounce of faith disappeared. Sources inside the facility described the atmosphere as tight, not explosive, just uneasy, like everyone was waiting for something to break. Players wanted to believe the coaching staffs would eventually do the right thing, that talent and preparation would win out over politics. But week after week, the pattern stayed the same. Sanders would dominate practice, Gabriel would get the reps on Sunday. And when reporters asked about it, the answers felt rehearsed. Stefanski talked about development phases and trusting the process. But behind closed doors, players saw the truth. That process was costing them games. By the time the regular season began, the divide was no longer invisible. The offense had become cautious, playing not to make mistakes, rather than to win. The defense had turned into the emotional heartbeat of the team, carrying the load, keeping games alive, masking offensive failures. It was a formula that might hold for a few weeks, but everyone knew it wasn't sustainable. Then came the first loss. One that could have gone either way. The kind of game where a spark, a single drive could have changed everything. Sanders was ready that day too, standing by, helmet on, just like always. But the switch never flipped. And after that, the whispers turned into frustration.
Players began pulling aside coaches, not to challenge authority, but to plead for practicality, to stop protecting egos and start chasing wins. Some even hinted that loyalty to the development plan was starting to outweigh loyalty to the team. That's when things got personal. According to insiders, Sanders handled the entire ordeal with restraint. No outbursts, no drama, no shots fired on social media. Just professionalism. But that composure only made the situation more uncomfortable for everyone else. His teammates respected him more each week, and the more they respected him, the harder it became to justify his absence from the field. By the time Sunday rolled around, the tension wasn't just emotional, it was structural. The entire organization was split down the middle, those who still believed in the plan and those who just wanted to win football games. And when Gabriel's collapse unfolded in front of millions, it wasn't a shock. It was the inevitable result of months of denial. Because this wasn't a story about one bad game, it was the slow unraveling of a promise that merit mattered more than politics, a promise that performance determined opportunity, a promise that winning came first. And when a team starts realizing those promises don't mean anything anymore, that's when belief dies, quietly, completely, and long before the scoreboard ever does. When the clock hit 0 on Sunday, the outrage didn't just stay in the locker room, it exploded across Cleveland. What began as quiet tension inside the organization had turned into a full-blown storm, one that social media, talk shows, and national analysts were more than ready to feed.
Within minutes, clips of Gabriel's worst throws and Sanders' stoic sideline focus were everywhere. Twitter threads dissected every expression, every shrug, every moment the camera caught Sanders looking ready but unused. Reddit turned into a digital war zone, fans breaking down play charts, arguing over locker room rumors, and demanding accountability from a coaching staff that suddenly looked more stubborn than strategic. Cleveland fans aren't known for patience. They've lived through decades of quarterback heartbreak, coaching experiments, and rebuilds that never seemed to rebuild anything. This time, though, the anger felt different. It wasn't about losing a game, it was about betrayal. Fans weren't furious because their team got outplayed, they were furious because it was avoidable, because the solution had been standing on the sideline the entire time. Sports talk radio lit up Monday morning like a fire alarm. Former players, ex-coaches, and analysts all saying the same thing. What is Kevin Stefanski doing? Even national shows picked it up. The story of a team built to compete, sabotaged by its own leadership. One segment on ESPN called it the most baffling personnel decision of the season. Another questioned whether the Browns were prioritizing pride over progress. Then came the leaks. Sources inside the locker room, reports from the facility, anonymous players speaking out. Every headline added fuel to the fire. Details started emerging about internal frustrations, about captains confronting coaches, about the front office being aware and concerned. What had been whispered inside the locker room was now being shouted on every platform imaginable. And the fans, they weren't letting it go. Hashtags demanding accountability trended nationwide. Comment sections filled with messages from people who had stuck by this team through the worst years imaginable, now saying they were done until something changed. The narrative had flipped completely. Stefanski wasn't being questioned anymore, he was being blamed. Meanwhile, Sanders' name was suddenly everywhere. His clips from practice started resurfacing online. Fans broke down his college highlights, comparing his confidence and poise to what they just watched from Gabriel. Analysts began to call him the obvious choice. He'd gone from quiet backup to the centerpiece of an online movement, the symbol of everything Cleveland could be if someone in charge would just make the obvious call. Inside the organization, things were unraveling fast. Stefanski held his post-game press conference with the usual calm, saying he still believed in Gabriel's development curve and that the process takes time. But this time, no one bought it. The words fell flat, rehearsed, robotic, detached from the chaos outside. Even the local media pressed harder than usual, asking bluntly if his refusal to play Sanders was personal.
Ownership, according to insiders, wasn't happy either. Phone calls were made, meetings were scheduled. The pressure was on, and not just from the fans, but from within. Players were tired of platitudes. The city was tired of excuses. And through all of it, Shedeur Sanders stayed silent. No tweets, no interviews, no public comments. Just quiet preparation, the same way he'd done all season. That silence, that refusal to add to the noise, only made the noise louder. Because now the story wasn't about a single loss. It was about leadership, about accountability, about a fan base that had finally run out of patience with a franchise that kept choosing ego over excellence. The Browns weren't just losing games anymore. They were losing the trust of the people who cared most. And as every headline, every video, every viral moment piled on, one truth became impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a football controversy anymore. It was a reckoning. Every football fan knows this truth. Talent wins games, but leadership wins seasons. And when leadership starts prioritizing pride over progress, even the most talented rosters crumble. That's exactly what's happening in Cleveland, and it's a mirror for something much bigger across the NFL. Because the Browns' problem isn't just about Dillon Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders. It's about a system built on reputation and hierarchy, where coaches cling to their guy, even when the results scream otherwise. It's about a culture that values control more than adaptation, and in professional football, that's fatal. Across the league, people were watching this unfold with quiet discomfort.
Coaches from other organizations, former players, even front office executives, all privately asking themselves the same question. Would I have done the same thing? Would I have benched the player who earned it just to protect the one I'd chosen? Would I have doubled down on a bad call to avoid admitting I was wrong? Because here's the harsh reality. Ego is one of the most dangerous forces in sports. It hides behind words like loyalty, development, the process. It sounds smart in press conferences, but inside locker rooms, players see right through it. They know when a coach is protecting his pride instead of protecting the team. They know when trusting the plan really means refusing to change. And the Browns locker room knew it. Veterans who'd played under championship coaches could feel the difference. They'd seen what real leadership looks like, the kind that adjusts, that listens, that's willing to bench the wrong guy for the right reason. This wasn't that. This was politics disguised as strategy, pride dressed up as patience. One player reportedly said it best, "You can't talk about accountability when it only applies to the players." That single line summed up the entire situation. The coaches demanded discipline, effort, precision. But when it came time to hold themselves accountable, silence, excuses, deflection. And that's how trust dies in professional sports. Not through one bad game, but through a pattern of decisions that tell players the truth doesn't matter anymore. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking. The Browns aren't rebuilding. This is a team built to win now, a top-tier defense, dangerous weapons on offense, a roster that should be terrifying every team in their division. But none of that matters when your leadership is fighting battles of pride instead of finding solutions. And that's what makes this story tragic. Because Shedeur Sanders isn't just a talented backup. He's become the embodiment of every player who's ever been ready but overlooked. Every competitor who did everything right, only to be told to wait because someone else's ego got in the way. The irony? The longer Cleveland refuses to make the obvious choice, the worse it looks. Not just for the coaching staff, but for the entire organization. What once was player development now looks like negligence. What once was trusting the process now feels like arrogance. And the deeper it goes, the harder it becomes to undo. This isn't just about football anymore, it's about culture, in sports, in leadership, in decision-making. The Browns situation has become a cautionary tale for every organization that confuses loyalty with stubbornness. Because at the end of the day, the scoreboard doesn't lie. You can't out-coach reality. You can't hide behind excuses forever. Eventually, every franchise has to choose. Protect your pride or protect your chance to win. And if Cleveland keeps choosing the first, they won't just lose games. They'll lose the locker room, the fans, and the belief that this organization ever learned from its past. Every franchise reaches a crossroads, a moment where excuses no longer matter, where the next decision either saves everything or burns it to the ground. For the Cleveland Browns, that moment is now. They've built too much, sacrificed too much, and promised too much to let it all collapse under the weight of pride. This isn't just about one quarterback anymore. It's about credibility, about whether the words "we want to win" actually mean anything inside that building. Because when leadership refuses to acknowledge the obvious, when they protect mistakes instead of correcting them, that's not loyalty, that's sabotage. Shedeur Sanders represents something far bigger than a name on a roster. He's the symbol of untapped potential, of what happens when readiness meets resistance. Every snap he didn't take became a reminder of what could have been, of drives that never started, of games that slipped away, of confidence that slowly drained from a team that once believed in itself.
And Dillon Gabriel? He's not the villain here. He's the byproduct of a broken system. A young player thrown into a storm he wasn't ready for, expected to thrive while the walls around him cracked. He didn't ask for favoritism, he didn't create the politics, but he became the face of them, whether he wanted to or not. Kevin Stefanski stands at the center of it all, holding the steering wheel of a ship that's drifting toward disaster. The fans know it. The players feel it.
Even the front office, by now, must sense it, that something foundational is slipping away. And in a city that has endured more heartbreak than most, patience is no longer part of the conversation. Because Cleveland isn't just asking for wins, they're asking for accountability, for courage, for a coach who can admit when the plan isn't working. That's not weakness, that's leadership, the kind that championship cultures are built on. The clock is ticking. Every week without change deepens the divide. Every loss adds another crack to a fragile foundation. And sooner or later, the Browns won't just be fighting opponents, they'll be fighting each other. But there's still time. That's the thing about defining moments. They don't end when the scoreboard hits 0. They live in what happens next. So here's the question Cleveland has to answer. Do you keep protecting egos, or do you finally start protecting your chance to win? Because at some point, all the film sessions, press conferences, and PR statements fade away. What's left is the truth, and the truth is brutally simple. Shedeur Sanders is ready. The team knows it, the fans know it. The only question is, when will the coaches finally admit it? Time is running out. Seasons slip away fast. Championship windows don't stay open forever. And for the Browns, this decision, right here, right now, will define everything.